So this morning about 11:15 we made a recovery of a body. This afternoon about 3 o'clock we cleared the list of our final missing person. So we're sad that our count is now at 20, but we're glad that our families now have the closure that they need to move on. So shortly after discovering our victim list was cleared, we've suspended all search operations. We're no longer expecting to find any more victims, but we are still on standby if somebody is reported missing to pick that search back up. We'll be shifting now to more of a cleanup effort, trying to help folks in town get things cleaned up and get things back to normal. So I'll let the sheriff speak a minute, and then we'll kind of get back to any questions you may have. So.
One of the things that I'd like to touch on what Chief said. When we have this many missing people, when we have this many victims, and to be able to get the closure, and speaking with TBI, a friend of mine over there, it's unheard of, and that speaks volumes to me about the people that were in this operation. And I'm not talking about the top half of that. I'm talking about when it comes to the boots on the ground and the people that were doing the things that needed to be done and doing these operations day in and day out, hour in, hour out. That says volumes about the people that were involved in this. One of the things that we pulled the trigger on early on was reaching out with TBI. Chief and I talked about this. We were able to get some of our victims that may have been hard to identify. We were able to get them identified through DNA. I don't understand all of that part. It's very technical to the scientists, but this equipment that TBI has and that was able to come in here and help us get identifications made within an hour and a half was very, very important in this operation, and it helps these families get closure and closure quick. And we're very proud to have that accessible. And I just can't say enough about the people that run this operation. Like I said, the ones that were boots on the ground, that were out there, the responders. My hat's off to you, and I have the utmost love and respect for you.
I will mention this technology that the TBI brought is new. It's never been used in Tennessee, and it's probably the best thing that impressed me is it took away the family having to be involved in identification of their loved one. And
Absolutely.
Yes, so right now we've shifted into an investigative mode. My detectives are now working. Each case is a death investigation. They're just tying up loose ends, trying to find out the circumstances about how somebody went in the water, how they, where we found them, and tying all those records together. They're working alongside the sheriff's detectives, and so we have almost a little task force going of compiling that information and working each one as an individual. We're going to treat each one with the individual respect it deserves to get the answers about what happened in each of those cases. And while they're all, there's no crime suspected, it was just a terrible disaster, but we still want to investigate and find out what happened. So that process will be ongoing. It'll take a while, but it is ongoing. I don't have any update to provide you on that. That might be something, CSX might be able to provide a little more information. I understand I don't know yet if the road is totally open. I didn't get an update on that before I came, but we expect it to be shortly if it's not already. TDOT initially told us that Friday would open up Highway 70 toward the east, and I hope it's an over or under promise and over deliver situation. They've been working very hard to get the road open, and it is passable for emergency vehicles, so that's helped us in moving east and west in the county. If it's not open as we speak, it probably will be shortly. They told me they were just doing shoulder work now, trying to get things back to normal. And alongside the roadway, that CSX work is occurring, or has occurred, and so I suspect things will be back to normal down there pretty soon. So. No, I don't. I actually think it was just the volume of rainfall, and one of the things that needs to be considered, this event didn't occur just on Trace Creek. It's just that's where the population occurred. Blue Creek, some of the other creeks experienced just as devastating flooding. For example, one of my police officers lives on Blue Creek, and that's where his home was washed off the foundation. So we had a similar event without a railroad track and without I guess what you're calling a levee, the railroad tracks there. So no, I think it was Mother Nature. I think it was just a lot of rain.
Would you also blame Mother Nature for this much drowning as well?
Well, certainly people were caught off guard, and that rain fell at the head of the creek, and it all came rushing down at the same time. And as we said yesterday, I hate to use the term perfect storm because that may not be good terminology right now, but it did create that horrible mix that caused a lot of people to lose their lives.
These final discoveries, were these mainly law enforcement that were able to make the recoveries today, or they volunteers or a combination?
Yes, it was a combination, but so we've had law enforcement and fire resources, TWRA, a lot of agencies involved. We had resumed the searching this morning in the areas that we thought were most likely to, where our victim was most likely to be found. And there was a little bit of analysis done there by some of our staff to try to pinpoint the best place. We've used dogs, heavy equipment. It's just been very painstaking because it's a tedious process to get in there and look for victims. And bless their hearts, those guys have worked really, really hard. Guys and gals have worked very, very hard to get in there and get it done. Today was about our victim, and we found her.
It's a thankless job, a hard job,
Yeah.
For you all to do. So how do you help your officers, your volunteers, your crews that are out here that are having to do that when you all know something?
Yeah, we lean on each other a lot. We step away a lot, take those minutes. We have folks here that are professionals helping us with that, chaplains and critical debriefing folks that we're already familiar with from our work in other critical incidents, and those are a help and will continue to be so as we go. Feel bad for some of our younger folks that have just entered the profession that have had to be involved in this early on. Chris and I are at the tail end in a way, as we've been at this a long time. But they've seen a lot of things in the last few days that I wish they didn't have to.
You said you switched more to a cleanup effort as far as search goes. Is it
Right.
possible there could be more victims that maybe haven't been reported missing yet that you don't know about yet?
So I'm not going to rule that possibility out, but there's no one that we know of now that is missing. So it's always a possibility that somebody's out there that just we don't know about, and we'll immediately address that if they're discovered. But as of right now, no, I don't expect to find any more victims.
If I may touch on that, Chief, if somebody is in doubt and they need to know something about a loved one and we can put that thought to rest, call dispatch. And that's some of the numbers that we've talked about, 296-7792. Call us. We want to do that welfare check and get that closure for you, or get some kind of information in your hand as soon as possible. So yeah, if you have if anybody has a doubt about a loved one, please do that.
Flood mitigation in the past,
You know, anytime you have a critical incident, whether it's this one or any other, we try to learn from it and make changes to it. And, you know, as a department, we've dealt with flooding before, and that's, you know, that's a reality when you live in a town built on a creek. So certainly we'll try to see what lessons get learned from this. It's a little too early yet to do that. We're right in the midst of it, and you know, right, yeah, and so you know, I told folks in 2010 when the flooding hit, it had been several years since we'd had a major flood in Waverly. I guess the mid 80s was probably the last serious flood we had. I think it was 84. So at least in my career, that was the first one I had to deal with. And, you know, going back then, we learned some lessons, like firefighters wading out in water wearing firefighting gear was kind of dumb. And we've learned from that. So from our department, we've picked up and learned a lot of things. We shifted our focus. We had flooding here a few years ago, and we bought life jackets for all of our responders. They have access, and some of them grab and use those this week to respond. So there's ways that we've mitigated as a department. The city's mitigated some of this by trying to improve infrastructure, work with state and federal governments to keep these creeks and bridges and so forth cleaned out, and I think they've done a good job of doing that along the way. I think this flood was just absolutely extraordinary in its volume as it came rushing through our little town.
Have you had a chance to talk with the final victims' family? How are they doing?
I have not talked to them personally since the recovery was made. I understand they just found out a few minutes ago, and I'm sure they're heartbroken. But I had the occasion to speak with them earlier in the weekend, and it was heartbreaking at that time. And any of you that have children would know what they're going through. You know, wondering. At least the wondering's over. So.
In terms of a cleanup effort, how do you move forward from here?
You know, that's what we're discussing and talking about today, and there's a lot of moving parts to that, and we're getting our key players in place. That's already been happening. FEMA is coming in pretty heavy today, and I know they've already been meeting with flood victims. They're meeting with, you know, that's one reason you don't see the mayor and the county executive standing here with us, is they're in meetings right now, getting that process planned. And this is going to be the point where Chris and I are stepping back and handling the security and the things that we normally do on a day-to-day basis, and let them be involved in clearing the streets and the debris and the repairing and things that have to go on here in town. So we're going to be there and helping all we can, but as far as the construction and the demolition and all those things that have to happen, so we're passing the torch in a way.
Well, one of the things to follow up on what Chief is talking about with that, this is going to be a slow process, and especially on the city government side of things, because of the public works, the damage and stuff that has. I've seen the outpour of love from Montgomery County. There again, I'm scared to name names because I'm scared I'll leave somebody out. But we've had some of these other agencies that's jumped in here to help our public works, to help our county highway department, to help and fill those needs for dump trucks. Like, to give you an example, we run out of rock earlier, out of the stockpile of rock that we were having to backfill and do things. And these other counties and these other cities have jumped in there. But that's going to take a little bit of time. And we're not really on that side of it, but that's going to take a little time to build that infrastructure back. But those guys are just falling in there and just doing a superb job on helping us and on that. So we've got to build our infrastructure, and you know, giving us time to build our infrastructure. Even on the county side, we've lost some equipment, so we're going to have to rebuild that too. And it's anytime you have that, and we're having to depend on the other people, that process is naturally slower. So.
Chief, I know your people on patrol starting Saturday did a great job, but what about your people on the inside that took the calls, your dispatchers? How are they now mostly?
They're hanging in there, and it's good you mentioned that. They've been included in these debriefs and things, and mental health services are available to them. I'm going to tell you, not only were they in there, we had former employees of the 911 center show up down here to help us. So when they know, even though they don't work here anymore, they knew it was slammed and covered up, and they came out and helped. And they manned the phones. They've been back and forth to the temporary location in McEwen that we had to have set up for a while. We don't forget them. They're a key part. I guess you call them the first responder. They're the ones that were on the phone with these folks that you've heard some of the recordings and all. They deal with the trauma in a different way, but it's a tough job for them. Thank you.
Why do you guys think there was such a sudden rise in the water, and has anyone investigated this aspect at all?
Well, I mean, just as I mentioned before, it was just, I think the news has reported something like 17 inches of rain in a few short hours, and it just was too much. It's like trying to pour a bucket into a coffee cup. It's just not going to happen. And, it's a volume issue, and I don't think there's any amount of intervention that's going to prevent something like that. It could have happened in any other town in this state that's sitting in a valley like this.
Have you investigated at all?
Well, sure. I mean, we're always going to look at, just like I mentioned earlier, we're going to look at what can we learn from this and what can we do moving forward. And I don't have the